Dittoz is getting stoned.
The agent that single-handedly destroyed Valorant, his rise and his fall. So let's
play.
I think it's important to start at the release time, because when Chamber first came out, people weren't too sure. I mean, his abilities just being guns didn't sound all that enticing. Where was that strong util that Chamber needed? But that was just speculation based off of the early videos we had of people just reacting to his abilities, not actually playing Chamber. It didn't take very long to realize his main gun was a pocket guardian in the sense of how it worked, especially the infinite range and the headshot one shot, and then the TP very prominently created a new problem for Valorant. A problem that Riot was already aware of. It started with Jett long ago, the op and dash.
Time to strike. Maybe not, it's 9-1. Up and over, kill!
Oh my God, man. On split, they employed so many similar tactics at that shot.
Chamber recreated this problem, a problem in which he would hold off angles, operate, get his pick, and disappear away with his rendezvous. But let's be honest, if that was the isolated issue, Chamber wouldn't have grown to prominence that bad. He added, I guess, oil to the fire in the sense of that pocket guardian, meaning his pick and teleport was even stronger. If you were a good shot, you got that headshot with your secondary gun, bought some bullets, got that headshot, you get a pick and get out even in the early or eco rounds, which are absolutely massive. But then it doubles down, because his ultimate was of course just a stronger version of an operator that shot extremely quickly and then created a slow field, which gave him that strong sentinel feel. I mean, if you were holding a choke point and you got that first pick, not only could you teleport away, the slow would ensure a slow push where you can then reposition and hold a new angle. Or better yet, you might not even need to teleport away, as you can keep getting pick after pick with that extremely strong ultimate. And it didn't help that some of the footage you've already watched, he had two trips which were known as the strongest trips in the game. They are what completed him as a sentinel, but on an already stacked kit, it was just adding salt to the wound. But just to further double down, I need to explain that in this story, just being strong isn't a huge deal. Agents are allowed to be overpowered for moments at a time as long as Riot is going to address it. But Chamber, over a year, was untouched, leaving him to be the longest dominating agent in Valorant's entire history.
What a broken ass character.
Over 365 days, more than 1 full year. And in that span, he had a peak pick rate of 80% in pro play and rose to the second most picked Valorant agent globally. People were begging on Twitter for him to be nerfed as he was staling out pro play as teams were forced to select him or lose. Now, it wasn't fully that simple in the sense that Chamber did go from 2 trips to 1 trip. You can see the footage as it's going back and forth. They're all while Chamber has been very strong, but the biggest change he got was a reduction in that trip. But that only removed or lowered his sentinel power, which is exactly the opposite of what Riot needed to do. We wanted a little bit more of a sentinel, which was his role, and a little bit less of this dominating powerhouse, which without any denial is what he continued on to be for a long time. But that part is kind of the rise, the dominance, and the destruction of Chamber and what he did to Valorant. But what about the flip side? Well, the flip side, as you can see, is that everyone jumped in joy. The word finally was used a lot. Finally, Chamber's nerf and his reckoning came to light. And here you'd ask, okay, what did they do? Well, I actually made a video about his original nerf. It had a rework to his TP in which you can only teleport to 1 anchor point instead of actually 2, but then they would also slow the equip time so you're more vulnerable after TPing. Once the TP was destroyed, it was actually disabled for the round instead of on a cooldown, which was alone massive since the TP was one of the core issues of Chamber as we discussed earlier. But it didn't stop there. Most Chamber players still have nightmares from these patch notes. They removed the TP activation height and tried to buff it by increasing the range, but it didn't do quite exactly what Riot was hoping, and it wasn't the end of his nerfs. That's the problem, is they didn't just tweak the TP. They went on to annihilate the rest of his kit. For the trap, the biggest problem is that it now had a range that it could be restricted, and the initial startup time was increased 2 to 4 seconds. Those two really hurt it, But then his ultimate, it got destroyed. It was extremely slow. The percent was reduced, the duration was reduced, and then it also shot slower. Just absolutely brutal. Headhunter spread also increased after the second bullet while spamming, making it a little bit less accurate. And overall, they just destroyed him. They just destroyed Chamber in every single way. But I guess that begs the question, did they go too far? Well, I guess that kind of depends. So in retrospect, when it comes to the average Valorant player, the nerfs did hit Chamber like a truck. I mean, within the last 3 months alone, Chamber's pick rate is 14.2%. But that's extreme. That's far from his pick rate pre-nerf. Like, very far from his pick rate pre-nerf. He fell very down, but he's not the worst. That's the thing. Breach, Neon, Yoru, and Astra, as well as Harbor, all have a lower pick rate than Chamber. But it's that win rate. Like even though Astra has a pick rate that's half of Chamber, 7%, with Chamber's 14%, Chamber still has a lower win rate than Astra. You know what I mean? It's all about a little bit of retrospect. But it's hard to say if they really overdid it, because he's not terrible and there's still agents that need more attention than Chamber. But to completely put him in a healthy spot, or to claim that he's in a healthy spot, is something hard to do. And the reason being is because he is lacking a little bit of identity. He's gonna stay a little lackluster until you buff or rework him again. He simply doesn't feel like the Sentinel role that he is supposed to be, and without major tweaks to maybe able to give him more traps, he's never going to be. In the end, Riot decided to give Chamber, my man, guns. That is his identity, that is his style, that's the entire play of him. And either he's gonna be strong with those guns, or they're not going to be very strong, and just normal guns that you buy in Valorant will be stronger. It's kind of a balancing nightmare, and I mentioned this long ago before Chamber was nerfed. I made a video about him having a near 100% pick rate and the problems with him. And a lot of people did agree he needed a nerf. I didn't get too much backlash on that video, but what people suggested and what Riot did was a far cry. They did most likely overdo it. But then there's a little bit more to this story. Right before the video ends, just a month ago, we saw Chamber return in Pro Valorant.
Having that ability, you can see what they're using that cascade for. They're using it to get aggressive defensively and put themselves in forward positions. And Clear goes in a really awkward corner. A nice thought out thing by Disguise to just earn more utility more often early round.
Now, truth be told, you should be watching Teets. He's actually an amazing creator, and his video explains it best. But it is also thanks to his video that you can quickly realize the reason Chamber even had an impact, and by the way, had a 0% pick rate up until DSG decided to play him, is mainly because of team coordination and play. I'm really sorry about playing the same play over and over. It's a little bit boring, but it's the fact that they use Harbor, someone else I also complain about in general play, to make and allow Chamber to push up and DSG clean to be in an insane position to get a pick and get out. Chamber can still be very oppressive. He just needs to be used in the correct team comp in order to allow that pressure to be put in the correct manner. Now, yeah, that's my problem, is that a lot of times there's disconnect between these videos, in which a lot of you guys last time when I talked about Harbor mentioned pro play, and the truth of solo queue and playing Chamber on your own right now. Be honest, think of the last time you really saw a Chamber compared to how much you saw Chamber beforehand. There's no denying that his fall from grace is still happening, and it's still there. He's not nearly as prominent, but that's not exactly a bad thing. Do you guys think he needs a buff, or do you prefer him to stay buried?